Me and Sam, we've killed just about everything there is. We've killed angels, killed demons, gods. What is next?
This is where it ends.
I just watched a whole planet burn alive. God, he'll be back soon. Could be today, could be tomorrow, but when he comes, there won't be a moment to waste.
We got work to do.
Born to this, boys. It's your destiny. Who's always here. Welcome to the end.
Hey everyone, it's Soul here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before I get into this week's video, I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for all of the love and support on my Until Dawn and the Quarry video. I can't thank you enough for all of the support, and I absolutely love reading through all of your thoughts and opinions on the games. Even if I don't respond, I still tend to read through most of the comments, and it's really fun for me to see what you guys agree with, what you disagree with, and other theories and ideas related to the game that I may have missed along the way. You guys really seem to like these sort of deep dive analysis on those games, and I really enjoyed making a longer format video. So for this week, I wanted to try and do a deep dive analysis and a longer video for a TV show that I am sure many of you have seen or at the very least heard of before, and that show is Supernatural. Now, coming from someone who grew up in the later days of the Super Who Murloc Tumblr and Twitter pages, and yes, it's Murloc, not just Super Who Lock, okay? You cannot leave out BBC's Merlin because that show is perfection. But point being, I grew up with not only the show Supernatural, but also as a part of the fandom that supported the show throughout the years. Now, when I first started watching Supernatural, I was in middle school at the time, and I think there was already either 8 or 9 seasons out, so I definitely cannot say that I am an OG fan, but I did get to live through my high school and college years with the excitement of wanting and waiting to see each and every new season for the next 6 years. And I'll be quite honest, there was a moment that I thought this show might become like Doctor Who in the sense that they just didn't know how they could end such a large show, so maybe they'll just keep it going forever or until the fans had lost interest. So when it was actually announced that the 15th season was going to be the final one, I was very eager to see how they could wrap this all up, and well, let's just say it wasn't a great ending. It wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't as good as I expected it to be, and what I feel it should have been for a show that has such a huge and dedicated fan group that has kept them going over the years. And I don't know, it fell a bit short as a whole, and I think many of the fans have some problems with the subpar writing for this grand finale of a show that they love. With the season finale being aired 3 years ago, I wanted to revisit this story and watch this final season to figure out where this went wrong for me. So let's dive in, shall we? Before we do though, please remember to hit that like button, click subscribe to see more videos from me, and leave a comment down below. Here is your one and only warning that this video contains spoilers. Alright, grab your salt shells, your silver blade, your angel lover, and your demon bestie, and let's buckle up those seatbelts to take a drive in that iconic Impala. Supernatural is a CW show that aired its first season back in September of 2005, with its final season being aired live in the fall of 2020. The show follows the story of two brothers, Sam and Dean, as they go about the many dangers and adventures of hunting ghosts, ghouls, monsters, demons, angels, and so much more throughout the entirety of the show. Throughout the seasons, the show does tend to grow bigger and bigger, moving on from regular werewolves and vampires to alpha monsters, from crossroads demons to Lucifer and kings of hell, from an angel of the Lord to archangels to eventually God himself. I absolutely love how much fun the writers have throughout all of the seasons exploring all of the different religions, mythology, and lore in order to make all of the monsters and enemies in this show, even including some really memorable one-off monsters from different religions and cultures. With the plotline being kind of dark fantasy and very apparent of the grunge era in the early 2000s, with the help of some famous rock music, some cool cars, and funny well-timed jokes and insults, as well as a great and complex dynamic and relationship between the two brothers, the show quickly became a hit. With a whopping 15 seasons, the show has gone through a whole bunch of writers and directors. Like, seriously, just take a look at this list. However, most of the writing seems to have been done by Eric Kripke, while Robert Singer and Philip Sgriccia are the most consistent or most commonly reoccurring directors over the years. Sam and Dean, our show's heroes and stars, are played by Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles respectively, with Misha Collins starring as the angel Castiel, and in the later seasons, Alexander Calvert stars as the Nephilim Jack. The rest of the cast is massive, with many actors playing season-long leads or reoccurring side characters throughout the show. Over the years, actors such as Katie Cassidy, DJ Qualls, Kim Rhodes, Brianna Buckmaster, Felicia Day, Emily Perkins, Samantha Smith, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Ruth Connell, Osric Chow, Mark Shepard, Rachel Miner, Emily Swallow, Mark Benedict, Jake Abel, Mark Pellegrino, Jim Beaver, and so many more actors have all been a part of the Supernatural cast. I have to give all of the main actors a huge round of applause for their work with these characters. I mean, playing the same character for 15 years, that takes a lot of dedication and effort. It is sadly quite common for actors to hate playing their characters after a few years, simply because it can get quite exhausting being the same person for so long, and it can also cause the actor to feel a bit stuck in their career. They may have had to turn down other acting opportunities in order to stick to their film schedule of Supernatural. So I just want to say a huge thank you to these actors for being in it so long and seeing it through to the end. Similarly, I have to give a round of applause to the actors that play all of the side characters. With this show constantly killing off and bringing back the same characters or parallel versions of the same characters, I am just so grateful that so many of the original actors were able and willing to come back and fill their roles in their characters, especially in this final season. It is really fun to see so many familiar faces, even with the ghosts in the first 3 episodes in that final season. It definitely made for a really nice full circle feeling to the show, and it also kept the feeling of consistency and continuity since they didn't need to switch out actors for any of the fan favorite side characters. Now, I'd be insane to sit here and recap every single event that occurs in this show, but that doesn't mean I can't skim through it for you, right? Right? I'm not crazy. Let's just take a quick look back down memory lane. We start off the show with Sam, who has given up monster hunting in order to live a normal life at college. His older brother Dean followed the footsteps of their father and became a hunter. However, after their dad didn't come home from a hunting trip, Dean shows up at Sam's dorm asking for help from Sam to find their father. The two end up solving a ghost case, The Woman in White, before Sam ultimately decides that he needs to go back to college. Sadly, he arrives home to find his girlfriend Jess dead and hanging on the ceiling before the place bursts into flames, exactly like how his mother had died when Sam was a baby. With the fire leaving Sam eager to find whatever it is that killed Jess, he is seen packing up the car, heading out with Dean. In the rest of season 1, the brothers are focused on finding their father, who they do end up reconnecting with, and together they all hunt down the yellow-eyed demon Azazel, who is responsible for killing Jess and their mother. Season 1 ends with them having a face-off with the demon Azazel before he rams them with a truck. In season 2, we see the demon kill John as a deal to make sure Dean survives from his injuries from the car accident. With the death of their father strong in their mind, the brothers go on to hunt Azazel, and it turns out that Sam, who's been experiencing strange visions and premonitions since season 1, has demon powers from Azazel, who gave him a drop of demon blood as a baby. As some sort of weird plan and trap from Azazel, Sam now has to battle to the death with other people who have demon blood in them. From this fight, Sam dies, so Dean ends up trading his soul in order to save Sam, and because of that, Dean gets 1 year left to live. With the new time limit pushing them forward, the two brothers finally kill Azazel. Moving on to season 3, the brothers try to find different ways to save Dean's soul, but ultimately, as the season goes on, after many fun episodes of hunting and a lot of failed attempts to save Dean's soul, he eventually dies and goes to hell. Season 4 starts with Dean being brought back by an angel named Castiel, who the Winchesters go on to work with to try and stop Lilith from breaking the 66 seals. But with Sam being full up on demon blood and getting tricked by the demon Ruby, he ends up breaking the last seal and releasing Lucifer from his cage. Season 5, the Apocalypse season. The fight to stop the end of the world, to stop Lucifer and Michael from fighting, while also trying not to become the vessels for Lucifer and the Archangel Michael. An epic fight ensues, and Sam falls into the pit, dragging down both Lucifer and Michael with him in order to save the world. Season 6, Sam is somehow back from hell without a soul, as well as the boys' grandfather from their mother's side being taken out of heaven and put on earth. Together, the two of them have been working to capture alpha monsters for the King of Hell, Crowley, who then wishes to use the alpha's blood in order to locate and absorb souls from purgatory. With the help from Dean, Sam is able to get his soul back, but it turns out that it isn't Crowley that is behind all this. It is all part of Castiel's plan to gain power from the souls in purgatory in order to take charge of heaven, which has been in a big civil war ever since the failed apocalypse. Cass ends up doing the ritual and he declares himself God at the end of season 6. At the start of season 7, we see some godlike powers from Cass, but the Winchesters eventually convince him to return the souls to purgatory, but sadly, some end up escaping during the process, leaving the hunters with the new enemies called Leviathans. Bobby, a hunter who is like a father figure for the Winchesters throughout this show, is sadly killed by the Leviathans, but with the help of a prophet named Kevin, the brothers do manage to kill the Leviathan leader Dick Roman, but Cass and Dean end up in purgatory because of it. Season 8 takes place a whole year later, in which Dean arrives back to Earth with a vampire friend from purgatory. Sam, who's been living a normal life, somehow missed the fact that the prophet Kevin had escaped from the demon Crowley's prison. Together with the brothers, Kevin helps decipher the demon tablet in order to try and trap Hell, and then, working with the angel and the scribe Metatron, the group think that they can do the same thing to Heaven, trap it and seal it away, but Metatron actually tricks them and he breaks Heaven apart, causing all of the angels to fall from the sky. It is also in this season that Sam and Dean finally get a permanent home in the bunker of the Men of Letters. Just a quick side note here, I absolutely love the concept and background information of the brothers, in which they think that it's their dad who is the main hunter, but then it turns out that the mother side of the family were the true hunters and their father never started hunting until the death of their mother. When you add that to the fact that their grandfather on their dad's side was a man of letters, aka a hunter organization from the UK, it really is just a perfect union and a great family history that emphasizes how special Sam and Dean are to the world of hunting. And it definitely explains why they are so good at what they do. It's literally in their blood, and that's just some great family history details. Moving forward to season 9, Kevin, Crowley, Cass, and Dean all work together to find a way to put the angels back into heaven, while Sam is possessed by an angel named Ezekiel as a way to survive and heal from his injuries. Ezekiel, who is actually revealed to be Galadriel, the angel that failed to guard the Garden of Eden, he ends up teaming up with Metatron to try and take over heaven, but he ends up helping Cass instead as a way to take down Metatron. Meanwhile, Dean gets the first blade and the Mark of Cain in order to kill the demon Abaddon, who is a knight of hell, or one of the original demons. And by the end of the season, he is successful. The group then go on to defeat Metatron, but Dean sadly dies, only to come back as a demon because of the Mark of Cain still being on his body. Season 10, Demon Dean has some fun before Sam and Cass cure him, bringing him back to a normal human being. But sadly, the mark still remains, and Dean ends up fighting and beating Cain himself, who has been going around killing all of his descendants out of guilt. Dean then struggles to not give in to the mark's bloody and angered temptations, but after Charlie is killed, Dean goes on a massive killing spree before he eventually gets the mark off with the help from the witch Rowena and Death. Well, he actually gets it off by killing Death, but anyways, the darkness that was being contained in the mark gets released. In season 11, we get to watch Amara, the embodiment of darkness, grow up, and her and Dean have this very weird romantic connection before the group struggle to find a way to defeat her. But the only way they are able to take her down is because Chuck shows up just in time and reveals that he is God and is Amara's younger brother. The two siblings resolve their issues by going on a trip through the galaxies, but Amara leaves a parting gift with Dean and brings his mother back to life. In season 12, we watch the boys struggle to believe and manage the return of their mother, while Crowley helps Lucifer return from hell and wreak havoc before Lucifer becomes president and ends up trying to create a Nephilim, a half-angel, half-human offspring. The group, while also dealing with issues from the head office of the Men of Letters, they seek to destroy Lucifer, but they are sadly too late. Despite trying to help the mother Kelly and find a solution to their situation, the Nephilim baby is born and Lucifer and Mary get trapped in an apocalypse parallel world that was created by the birth of a Nephilim, but not before Lucifer kills Cass. In season 13, they try to find the Nephilim and Cass eventually comes back from the empty. They end up finding the Nephilim whose name is Jack, and they try to help teach him as he struggles to learn to control his powers and do right from wrong. They also end up using his powers to help get everyone from the apocalypse world safe to Earth. But as a last resort to stop Lucifer from using Jack's power to destroy the Earth, Dean lets Michael use him as a vessel to defeat and kill Lucifer. Season 14, we're almost there, everyone. We're almost at the end of the show. In this season, we watch as Jack is left without his powers, and the group tries to defeat Michael by trying to find a weapon from the bad place that scared Michael enough to leave Dean's body. Next, the group deals with the soulless Jack, who accidentally goes on to kill their mother Mary, before he ends up going crazy being angered by the brothers lying to him, and he causes humanity to tell the truth. This massive event causes Chuck/God to return to Earth, and he gives the Winchesters a weapon to kill Jack with. But when Dean is about to shoot Jack in the head, he decides not to, and this angers God, who just wanted a fun end to the story of his favorite show, the lives of Sam, Dean, Jack, and Cass. With the sudden realization that Chuck uses their lives as entertainment, the brothers retaliate as Sam shoots Chuck in the shoulder, and Chuck goes on to kill Jack before starting what he calls the end. He breaks open hell, releasing all the demons and evil spirits upon the Winchesters, and with this epic cliffhanger, the brothers in danger, we finally arrive at the season finale that we will be discussing today. We get to follow along with the brothers for one last ride as they try to find a way to take down God. But even just going through the recap of every season here, a reoccurring problem begins to appear that I think definitely affects this final season. As the show continues, the last few seasons begin to get very cluttered with a lot of different plot lines occurring all at once, or a lot of things starting and getting resolved very swiftly, or just a lot of plot lines being started and never finished. And sadly, this rushed sort of rapid-fire plotline pattern is something that brings down the final season. In theory, and in the most basic form of the concepts of this season, it's all really good ideas and good concepts. I love the idea of Dean ending up in heaven. I like the idea of Jack taking over as this sort of second god. I love the idea of every single ghost and demon that they've ever fought breaking loose and roaming around on Earth. I love the idea of Adam going against his father God. And I like Billy being extra sneaky and planning to take over. But ultimately, the show is destroyed by the execution of all of these ideas being so rushed and poorly done. Each and every one of these ideas could have been their own season finale plotline if they had just expanded upon it. I personally think that the series finale, or the last episode, is the most affected by the poor execution, and it aggravates me a lot more than the rest of the season. So because of that, I will be saving that for the end, because I just have so much that I want to say about it. But look, as a whole, the final season, it's okay. Like I said, I do like all of the concepts, and on the surface level, it is somewhat enjoyable to watch this season. But it's sadly very dull, and there's nothing super groundbreaking about it. There's also not that many crazy good moments like I feel there should have been for something that is a season finale. Overall, the season feels very low energy and low in stakes, and it also did leave me with quite a few questions and confusion over the details, and I just wish that they would have slowed down the pacing in order to allow a deeper dive and a closer look into each and every plotline and character. So now let's break it down episode by episode. Season 15 starts off with the 3-episode plotline creating this sort of mini-movie feeling to it. With these first 3 episodes, we watch as they try to contain the demons and the ghosts that have all been released by God in the finale of Season 14. I actually don't have much to say about this plotline because, for the most part, they're pretty good. Yeah, it definitely could have been its own sort of season finale plotline, and they could have stretched it out. Like, it could have been really cool to see a lot more ghosts, demons, and spirits scattered around the world, and they have to go hunting after each and every one that escaped, just like how Eileen escaped before the walls were up. I feel like there would be a lot more demons and ghosts scattered around. That could have been really cool for them to revisit and hunt down as the story went on. Or even if in that last episode, instead of it being vampires, it could have been a ghost or a spirit that released from hell and escaped before the walls went up. I do also feel like the ghost should have been a little more threatening during these first 3 episodes, since the overall threat to our main characters feels a bit slim. I think that most of us fans don't really feel the weight of the "we need to save the world" stake anymore, and I might be wrong for putting words into other people's mouths, but I think it's only natural for viewers to care a lot more about the characters themselves. So with them making it seem like containing the ghosts is a walk in the park for most of the episodes, it definitely wasn't as intense as it could have been, especially episode 2, which was really low on the threat level. But again, these first 3 episodes are still okay, and they do make for a good introduction. I personally really loved Cass and Belphegor's fight in hell, as the development that it created and caused between Cass and Dean's character and relationship was really good. I think that putting this divide between our heroes at such a crucial moment definitely added a little bit of tension and was a smart decision to make, But I just can't help but wish that this divide and this sort of slight tension that it created went on for a bit longer, simply because the season kind of lacked tension as a whole. So if they were to have kept this in for a lot longer, at least that would have caused some amount of tension throughout the remainder of the season. In these first 3 episodes, I do want to speak about 2 very important characters. The first is the addition of Kevin's ghost. That was a bit weird for me, since he's basically left on Earth as a ghost to probably turn crazy and turn evil like every other spirit that was left behind or stuck on Earth. We've seen it so many times throughout the show, so it's definitely a bit strange that Sam and Dean are okay with this happening to Kevin. What makes this even more strange to me, and I would argue just a little bit worse towards Kevin, is the fact that they came up with a better idea later on in the show when they end up meeting Eileen as a ghost. They decide that they could put her in her own crystal, but they don't ever think of that or even have the idea of doing that for Kevin. So I don't know, it's definitely weird to think that they're so fine with letting Kevin turn an evil spirit. It's also even more strange to me that the guys just forget about him almost immediately. Like, they express some amount of guilt for him when he is leaving. But I don't know, I feel like they would feel really guilty and bad for Kevin, and instead of having maybe one of the filler episodes in this season, it might have been nice to see them and see especially Sam, who probably feels the most guilty in regards to Kevin's death, to see them researching and trying to locate Kevin to try and give him a happier ending. Or at the very least, it would have been nice to see Sam struggle with his guilt a lot more. If the CW ever does a spin-off show where we see Sam secretly hunting while living the supposed normal life that we saw in the finale of this season, or if Sam's son gets his own show about hunting, part of me really hopes that Kevin would make an appearance, either as a full-on crazy ghost or as a nice ghost who they try to send to heaven. Something like that would be nice to see if they ever do a spin-off, simply because I just don't like this ending for Kevin. The second character that I just have to talk about is Rowena, who ends up dying in episode 3. I think that her death is pretty good, but I am just a smidge confused by her sudden freak out when the first spell with the wall failed. I find it ever so slightly out of character for her to be so panicked when she knew that there is other spells in her book that could maybe help. While this may seem like something small, the real kicker and the reason that I'm pointing this out is that it has such sloppy writing due to the writing contradicting itself almost immediately. Rowena starts off by saying after the first spell fails that there is no magic that can save us. And then not even 20 minutes later she says magic can do anything. And she walks away all triumphantly. It was just a bit off for me because I just really don't like when characters contradict themselves so soon in any show, especially when they do it in the same episode so quickly. But minor writing details aside, I actually really like her dying by Sam's unwanting hand, as well as her sacrificing herself for the world. It was a nice way to end her character, since, well, in the beginning of the show, we meet her as this very selfish and greedy person. So her development and her character arc as a whole is really nice to see play out. Throughout the rest of the season, I really enjoyed seeing Chuck, or God, struggle. As a person who really enjoys stories and adaptations of gods and almighty beings being in very human situations and dealing with human emotions, I really loved seeing him talk about his problems with Becky in episode 4. And I really think that his interactions with Amara are great additions to the season, not only because it helps us get a better idea of Chuck as God, but it also gives a nice little character development towards Amara. I mean, Amara is the embodiment of darkness, and seeing her just absolutely fall in love with the simplicities and joys of the human world was a really fun detail. Episode 5 might just be my favorite episode from the entire season, simply because of the shock and the jaw-dropping moment of Lilith being back. It was so well done. Even though I watched this season when it first aired live, I somehow forgot about this giant twist, and I was so distracted with the events of the hunt that I actually gasped when the girl fell on the antlers. It was so fun to have Lilith back in the game, but I can't help but feel like they cut her story and the impact of her character on the plotline a bit too short. I just really wish there was more of her in this season. I will also add that it's infuriating that the brothers left this gigantic, powerful, almighty weapon in the glove box. Not even in the trunk with zero angel or demon warding. It's just a stupid mistake that I feel like after 15 years of hunting, the brothers would have learned to do by now. And I can't help but feel like throughout much of the season, the Winchesters have been written to be slightly dumbed down for apparently no reason other than plot convenience. The next 2 episodes, they're kind of just filler episodes. Like, yeah, they're fun to watch, but when I was rewatching this season for this video, I couldn't help but feel just a bit lackluster. Where is the urgency? Where is the planning for the attack? Where are the stakes getting raised? And I think I would have liked episode 6 a bit better if them going to Rowena's happened deliberately and not as an afterthought. I know that Sam throws in the one line of "we've been meaning to go there anyway," but I just feel like they are really stupid for not going sooner. Rowena was the most powerful witch in existence. Did they really not think for 1 minute that there would be other witches after her stuff? Plus, Rowena's place would be the first place that I think that they should be looking for any other information on spells and traps to hurt and harm God. So it just feels a bit stupid that they don't go to Rowena's place sooner to look for information. I am glad that we did get to see them go to her place after her death, and I did enjoy that episode because it has been a while since we had a true witch attack on the brothers, so it definitely was cool to see. But the fact that they only took 1 spell from the place and they didn't bother searching through anything else, it definitely aggravates me a little bit. There's so many things they could use in there. Why not take some books, take some things back with you to the bunker? Also, just a small question in this episode. How is it that Eileen is able to be in the bunker as a ghost? I thought the bunker was warded from ghosts and demons, and that it's only okay for angels to get in because there's really no angel warding. I might be missing something from an earlier season of the show that I've forgotten about, so if someone could refresh my memory, I'd greatly appreciate that, because if the bunker isn't safe from ghosts, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it being a safe haven for hunters. Episode 8 is where things finally start to take off again, with them searching for Michael and trying to learn how to trap God with Michael knowing the spell. It was such a nice touch to see Michael and Adam sort of coexisting together, as well as Lilith interacting with Michael. I have to say, at this point in the show, I was really enjoying the return of these 2 characters. Michael's development in this episode of him giving Cass and Dean the information to trap God is so good, and I really love the idea of him just walking away to live a normal human life through the shared existence of him and Adam. Part of me wishes that they would have left his character there, because I really don't like how he ends up betraying the Winchesters later on, since his actions at the end of the season completely undo everything that has happened in this episode. So yeah, as a whole, I'm just not a fan of his outcome in the end, but in this particular episode, I did enjoy his characterization and plotline. I won't lie, I teared up a little bit in episode 9 as Dean reaches out and apologizes to Cass. I really like how it's done as a prayer to Cass, and it's not done in person, because for starters, I think it's pretty fitting to Dean's character. Dean is someone who can be a bit prideful at times and sometimes resistant to apologizing. So it felt very fitting that Dean would pray and apologize instead of doing it in person. I mean, obviously part of the reason that he prays is because he doesn't know if he's going to see Cass again, so having that extra weight on his shoulders made this performance and this whole speech and prayer a lot more emotional to watch. Another reason that I like it being a prayer is that I felt it was a nice way to remind us of the connection between Cass and Dean. Whether you ship Castiel or not, I mean, listen, let's all be honest with ourselves. The CW definitely queerbaited these 2 characters to the max, but whether you ship them or not, there is no denying the connection between them. I mean, the show has pointed it out so many times by Cass only answering Dean's prayers over Sam and a lot of other small details. So it was kind of nice to see this sort of divine connection that they shared one more time in the final season of the show. The plotline of Sam having to give up hope, which is what ultimately allows God to heal from the gunshot wound that they shared, that is something that I really wish we got more out of. I wish that God trying to scare Sam into giving up hope would have been stretched out more, and it could have been really cool to see that his visions were a part of this plan. The visions being used as something to scare Sam into feeling hopelessness every single time when he wakes up. At least that would have helped give the visions some sort of purpose, because right now, the visions are just something that was seen on accident. So having that tie into God or Chuck capturing Sam, and Chuck showing Sam the future if he was killed, I definitely think it would have helped because it would have all seemed like a consistent, purposeful plan instead of just an accident. I also don't feel like the future that we saw is as threatening as it's supposed to be. Like, I know that it's supposed to be a very serious vision, but to me it came off a bit goofy. Like, Sam and Dean just turning into vampires and not stopping it or trying to off themselves because of it. Like, something about that just doesn't make much sense to me. And listen, maybe it's just the special effects, or maybe it's Jensen's monster face that just made me feel a little less serious in this moment and almost a bit comedic. But those scenes of the potential future just didn't come off as scary or serious as they should have. And I think if they had combined it with the visions that Sam had been seeing, it would have been a bit more understandable as to why Sam gives up hope. And listen, again, it's all good in concept, the idea of Sam needing to give up hope. It could have been such a good driving factor throughout the season, but instead, it's a 2-episode thing that is rushed and wrapped up really quickly, with the visions that Sam has been seeing up until this point being, well, pointless. I also, yet again, have found some of this to be a bit of sloppy writing, since later on in the season, when Sam is resisting going along with Billy's plan, he is portrayed as the person that is not giving up hope, while Dean is portrayed as giving up hope. It definitely doesn't seem to line up with Sam giving up hope now and then not giving up hope later. It is yet again a contradiction that the writers seem to gloss over, and I just can't help but feel it makes the show feel sloppy. I want to skip over the loss of luck plotline for the next few episodes because I find that it relates to a theory for the final episode. So moving forward with the rest of the season, I actually really like how things play out. Everything with Billy's plan, the events of Amara and God merging together, the group getting God's death book, and I love the addition of the Empty pursuing death and basically anyone and anything simply because it is unhappy with everyone. The presence of the Empty, I think, was a really smart addition, since the Empty's looming and constantly involved presence adds a bit of tension that we so desperately need in this season. We also just don't know too much about how the Empty works, so her freak out when Jack explodes and her gut-wrenching scream is so cool and bone-chilling. All of these ideas and plot lines above, they are yet again great things, but they sadly all merge together and tend to fly past us pretty quickly when they once again could have been stretched out to have a higher impact on all of the characters. I wish they would have dove further into Jack's return, because the only character that seems to struggle or seem changed by Jack returning is Dean, who still struggles to forgive Jack. I especially wish that we would have gotten more from Sam on that topic, and that the show would have showed us a lot more complexity from him instead of it being so clean-cut that Dean is mad and Sam is good. This then brings us to the death of Cass in episode 18, and oh my god, this is the best confession of love I've ever seen. It's so well done, and the twisting of the Empty's meaning of experiencing true happiness is beautifully poetic. Like, honestly, there isn't anything I would change about this event. However, nothing comes of his death. Dean, who was so tormented by the thought of leaving Cass in purgatory back in season 8 or whenever it was, is now acting almost like nothing happened after he just witnessed Cass get killed for good. We don't see any of the after effects Cass's death has on Dean, and it's really infuriating. It's made worse by the fact that we don't see or even hear anything about Cass at all once Dean dies and goes to heaven. We only get the one line that Cass helped rebuild heaven and gave Jack some ideas, but we never see Dean and Cass reunite. It's also just upsetting that we never get to see a resolution to Dean's feelings or experience from this tragic loss of such a close friend or potentially lover, depending on how you view their relationship. But either way, the fact that they glossed over Dean's feelings and the aftermath of Cass's death is so aggravating and disappointing. The grand finale, the final battle of Sam, Dean, and Jack fighting against God, is pretty good, but again, it's sadly set up quite rushed. I've already said I don't like Michael switching sides because it made all of his prior development feel pointless. But if they were to have dragged out Michael's involvement in everything related to trapping God, and he was looked at with a bit of a stronger lens, they definitely could have added a bit more hints from Michael or Adam to show some part of him wavering on going against his father, and it would have made his switching sides just a little bit more justified without essentially erasing his development from earlier. If they were to have slowed down and given us a close look at him, I definitely think it could have made for a lot more complexity and a lot more detail on his character, and would have made the setup for this ending trap a lot more interesting and full of tension. The idea of Sam being able to read God's book is actually a clever trick, and I really like how the Winchesters in the battle against God are constantly standing up despite the fact that they're beaten down so many times. Not only does this show their true character and true personalities that we've come to see, watching their resilient heart constantly get them to stand up, but it also shows us how Chuck is struggling morally every single time they get back up. He becomes ever so slightly more and more resistant or uncomfortable to beating them to the ground. And you could also argue that the reason that he begins to struggle morally and feel bad for them is because of the fact that he's losing parts of his divine power as the fight goes on, and the human-like qualities have therefore started to seep into him as he's losing his power, thus causing the moral difficulty every single time he has to beat them down. The setup and the execution of Jack absorbing the life forces is definitely smart and a clever addition to have, so having him end with absorbing God's powers and life force, it's a really strong ending move and decision for this show when it comes to the question of how do they defeat God. But then, sadly, more questions come and are unanswered. I know that they left Chuck alive in human form as a sort of punishment, but if Supernatural has shown us anything, it's how time and time again that humans, through supernatural powers, can become strong and evil forces on this world. So why do they leave Chuck alone and roaming the earth when he could easily make deals with demons or learn some witchy tricks to try and gain back some power? Again, this is something that if there ever was a spin-off of Sam living normal life while secretly hunting, or his son becoming a hunter, I would hope that they touch on Chuck in human form, because I find it hard to believe that Chuck just gives up after being beat down like this. And the other question is, if Jack absorbed God's powers, then there's really no need to keep God alive, right? The balance of the world is intact through Jack's powers balancing out Amara, so why leave Chuck alive and at risk to be a nuisance to them or other people in the future? While I like the idea of Chuck suffering as a mortal human, I just don't think it's the smartest decision. The overall ending of Jack leaving to fulfill God duties and fix the earth, heaven, and hell, it's again really good. But I think the issue that many of us have is how rushed everything is before leading up to this point. I don't even think Jack and the Winchesters truly resolved their issues from season 14. It all gets glossed over because most of the season is running on 2x speed. The build up to this event, the ultimate ending, and the fight against God, and Jack taking his powers, it all happened so fast because we were dealing with dropped or rushed plotlines earlier on in the season. Everything could have been its own season finale. All the ghosts and demons being freed from hell is one plotline, the return of Lucifer and Lilith working for God is another plotline, Michael working with the Winchesters is another one. The loss of Luck could have been a lot longer and more serious plotline as well. Billy bringing back Jack to kill God is another thing. Jack being able to absorb energy, while it does kind of go hand in hand with Billy bringing him back, it also could have been its own thing. But instead of really diving deep into one or two of these ideas, the show rushes past everything and keeps most of this surface level, which just feels a bit sloppy for the final season of the show. When you combine that with the minimal amount of tension and stakes that are felt in this show, it just makes the whole season feel subpar. Aside from the rushed writing and the poor execution that I find to be the sort of main reason for the season not being so good, there is something else that I think set up the feeling for this low energy ending, as well as could be blamed for a lot of the problems this show faces. And that is the problem of the show getting and growing too big. I said it in the beginning of this video, but when I was watching some of the earlier seasons, I wondered how the writers would be able to end this show simply because it felt like they got to a point that they expanded too far. Now, from what I see, almost any show that dives into the concept of God or viewing gods and goddesses and deities, they sometimes reach a point where they've gone too far into the ideas of the universe and it starts to cause a few problems. They will eventually lose the stakes and the feeling of severity since the show has grown so big. In Supernatural's case, a regular hunt will start to feel like a joke after the third apocalypse has been successfully defeated. The show actually realizes this earlier on, and they kept growing and adapting to create higher level stakes, but that simultaneously caused the show to be forced to keep growing even further. It's almost like a weird cyclical writing trap. If you make the show bigger and tougher, like, for example, introducing alpha versions of monsters, and you stick with them fighting only alphas for a while, you will start to feel like, what's one more alpha when you've already caught or killed 3 others? The feeling and the loss of urgency and risk is only made even worse when you then downgrade, and using the same example, when you go from fighting an alpha to all of a sudden a regular monster, it will feel like it should be a walk in the park and that there is no concern for death. So then the question arises, how do you fix that? How do you escape this cyclical writing trap? Well, to some extent you really can't. You have to keep making a bigger and badder enemy, such as they do with the Leviathans, and it kind of keeps endlessly growing and led the characters and the show to the inevitable enemy of God. So having a regular hunt after having them defeat God is going to make the stakes feel very low and overall low energy to the episode, no matter what they do. While there is, sadly, no way to really escape this sort of writing trap entirely, there are ways that they could have raised the stakes and the feeling of the show without relying on creating a bigger and worse enemy, and that is done through romance. Now, I said earlier on that Eileen arriving I felt was a good addition, and I stand by that. But I wish that they would have used her character for a lot more things because there is so much lost potential in this decision. I wish that, for starters, the writer made her and Sam's relationship a lot stronger and apparent right away, and not have left it as a sort of suggestive relationship. I also wish that something truly bad would have happened to her when Sam and her were trapped by God. Something more, and I kind of hate to say it because it sounds a bit cruel, but something more physical. I almost wish that she was really beaten up, bloodied, and injured because it would have made for a greater reaction out of Sam seeing the girl that he currently likes or maybe loves, depending on how strong they make their relationship earlier on. That would have drawn a greater reaction out of Sam. It could have made him want to fight against God even more, similar to how he was so hellbent for revenge for Jessica in the first season of the show. Seeing him so determined to destroy God after what he did to Eileen, it could have been that added energy that the season needed to make it great. Similarly, if Cass's confession had come a bit earlier on, say for example the plot with Billy and Jack's plan was a bit stretched out, came earlier in the season, and Cass's death was more around the middle mark or the 13th, 15th episode instead of episode 18, seeing Dean struggle with the loss of Cass like we saw back in season 8 could have also been an interesting development to drive Dean's characterization. He's lost Cass, and so now he is willing to do anything, and I mean absolutely anything, to save Sam so that he doesn't have to lose anyone else. Or if Cass had confessed and not actually died in that moment, it definitely could have been interesting to see how Cass would have fought and how the stakes would be raised for Cass as a character now that he's poured his heart out to Dean. He would fight so incredibly hard to make sure that they live, and just having those extra strengthened relationships to drive the story further along was definitely needed. But let me stop myself because I'm getting a bit distracted. My point is, the writers did none of this. They never heightened any of the relationships and connections between the characters, so instead we are left with the minimal amount of stakes of the final season, leaving the tone and energy quite low. Once again, when you add this to the feeling of them jumping from defeating God down to a regular hunt in which Dean gets killed, it's really hard to wrap your head around as a viewer. How is it that these heroes are so talented and skilled at so many things, they can outsmart God, but they can't defeat some vampires? It's really hard to accept and understand that concept. And listen, I know the writers are trying to go for the idea that hunting is still incredibly dangerous for anyone, and at the end of the day, Sam and Dean are now humans. I mean, that is the overall underlying message in this episode, that they finally escaped the control of God, and they're no longer superhumans, they are just normal people. And there is no other way for these characters and hunters to die than a hunter's death. That is to be expected. But it's still hard as a viewer to see such a smart character die from a normal hunt, especially since they somehow just got beaten by a tiny handful of vampires. From what I saw on the internet when the show first came out, many people, myself included, felt like it was a bit of a joke, since we've seen these characters not only defeat God, but on other hunts fight double the amount of monsters and come out without a scratch, or in other times they were less prepared for hunts and still came out on top. It is ridiculous to see what looks like an easy fight go so horribly wrong. Now, don't get me wrong, I completely expected one of the brothers, if not both of them, to die in the season finale. It's just one of those things where one of them just has to die because the show is so big and they die all of the time, so it makes sense to have one final death in which they cannot return. It's a very poetic end to the characters. And yes, it's also true that we know they have no divine help from Jack or Cass, as well as no help from any demons or witches at the moment. It is just the two of them. But I still can't help but wish that they had a lot more extras and actors to play the enemies in this scene, so that it actually feels like the brothers are overwhelmed and surrounded, so that it made Dean's death feel a little bit more understandable. It would of course still been hard to accept in the beginning, but at least the fight scene choreography and the overall feeling of the threat would be a lot more intense, rather than just 4 or 5 guys attacking our main characters. It's also just a smidge too comedic, how they pop their heads up ever so slowly looking through the windows. Like, the introduction to this scene is set up with not the best tension, and it feels almost like mugging and a bit too theatrical for what the show has gone for in the past. But of course, when talking about wanting more people in this scene, there is the elephant in the room. The thing that I have to point out is the impact the filming and production crew had from the sickness that I am not allowed to say on YouTube without getting demonetized. With all of the lockdowns going on during the production of this show, it has clearly impacted the finale. I saw online that they were supposed to have a lot more actors playing vampires, but with there being limits on the amount of people in one space at a time, it just wasn't possible. It's also why in this scene the enemies all have masks on, so that they could have more people and max out the amount of people in the scene. And while I know that there are filming techniques that they probably should have used in order to overlap and do some film trickery to make it look like there's more than just these 5 guys in the room, say perhaps filming Sam and the 5 guys fighting and then filming Dean and 5 other guys fighting on 2 separate sets or at 2 separate times, and blending those 2 films together to make it look like they're fighting, say, 10 vampires instead of just 5 altogether. While I do really want that, I do realize that there may have been issues with the budget and the time limit, so that might not have been possible. They may have already had the budget planned and split up before the shutdowns and lockdowns, and with the time limits and the show getting postponed because of the lockdowns, I understand that they may have been under a lot of pressure from the CW to just wrap things up. And while I can understand it being immensely challenging, I still just can't help but feel like they could have rewritten some parts of the ending. And listen, that may be bold of me to say and wrong of me to say, since I don't know the ins and outs of behind the scenes of the show, as well as all the restrictions that were put in place on the company. I also don't know where they were in production when the lockdowns and all of the shutdowns started, so what I may be saying might be a bit insensitive and wrong of me to say, but I just can't help but feel like they could have reworked and rewritten the last couple of episodes to create a better end to the story within the limitations of the lockdowns and shutdowns. But again, that might just be wrong of me to say, since the writers and directors have come out saying that they weren't able to do the true ending to the story that they wanted to. But with this being the final ending, let's just move forward to some of the theories about how Dean's death here is sort of explained and understood. One thing that I hear people theorizing about a lot is that with Chuck gone, the guys are now normal, but that also means that their luck is back to normal. And that is why they end up fighting pretty poorly and causing Dean to die. But oh my god, you guys, you have no idea how much I dislike this whole loss of luck plotline. It really angers me. Back in episode 10, God takes away the luck that he's gifted to the Winchesters, and they end up having all of these bad things happen to them, such as normal things like getting a cavity, catching a cold, and just overall having a bad, unlucky day. But then it also somehow makes them forget every single thing that they've ever learned. I mean, come on, my biggest issue with this is that there's a difference between luck and a skill. Having car troubles, catching a cold, being lactose intolerant, having a cavity, those are all things that can, for the most part, fall under the umbrella of luck. They're mostly unavoidable and a bit random, and yeah, it depends on your genetics a little bit, but genetics can also technically fall into the idea of luck. But things like shooting pool, picking a lock, and fighting, those are skills. And the worst thing about this is that 2 of those skills are tossed to the side as things related to luck, while the other third one, the shooting pool, is normal. It's seen as a skill and it's not affected by their loss of luck at all. And this is what infuriates me, because it does not make sense. How is it that they could shoot pool, which they've been doing for years, as Dean points out, but they can't fight or pick a lock, which is something else that they've been learning to do over the years of their life? It doesn't line up and it doesn't make sense, and that's why I just kind of despise this idea so much, because once again, the execution is so poorly done. Now, I feel like there's at least one of you saying, oh, well, God just let them get their luck back in that episode when they are shooting pool, because he just played them like he always does. And, well, technically, yes. Almost everything I'm saying you could sum up and explain by it just being God. But I just feel like that kind of goes back to what I said earlier, that the show got too big and too convenient in terms of the plot sometimes. And since Chuck can be used as an explanation and scapegoat for every single mystery or plot hole in the finale, I really don't like that, and I also don't think that that's what the writers were intending through parts in their script and the story. And let me tell you why I don't think it's Chuck gifting their luck back or allowing their luck to return in this moment. Throughout the season, we hear from Chuck that not everything went to plan. The Winchesters did go outside of his story outline a few times. The first thing coming to mind is the moment where Chuck gets disgusted by Dean and Amara's weird romantic connection thing that is revealed to have not been a part of his plan. The finale of season 14 is also ending on an action of Dean not shooting Jack, which directly goes against the finale and the ending that Chuck wanted to see happen and planned out. So we get this idea that not everything is controlled by God. So when we look at episode 11, Fortuna states that it was the humans that created the idea of her and the other deities, gods, and goddesses. And originally, this angered Chuck because it wasn't part of his original plan. Yet again, an example of something that wasn't part of God's plan. He instead decided to physically create and manifest the many gods and deities purely to use them as scapegoats for all of the bad things that happened on Earth before he went on to create the stories found in the Bible and gain the favor and worship of humans, therefore leaving the deities and gods and goddesses behind to feed on the scraps. But Fortuna, just like the other gods, goddesses, and deities that we've seen in the show, mainly way back in season 5, episode 19, they are not under the control or direct influence of God. The meeting of the gods in season 5, they wanted to actually stop the apocalypse from happening because they didn't want the earth to be destroyed. And sure, God probably knew what was going on based on the fact that Lucifer goes to that meeting to arguably stop the other deities from getting involved, but God himself doesn't seem to be able to control the will of the deities. So when you combine those two ideas, the idea that the gods and deities are acting on their own will and not under the control of the God, as well as the fact that the God doesn't always get every single detail according to plan, I just find it a bit hard to believe that God gifts the brothers their fortune and that it's not coming from Fortuna directly. Fortuna's genuine shock in the brothers being so giving and her surprise hearing their insistence on saving the innocent people in her pool hall is even more reason why I believe that she is the one that gifted the brothers their luck back from her powers, which, as she goes on to state, are drawn from prayers and belief from humans, as well as partially the luck that she's been skimming off the people. Her powers are not coming directly from God himself. So when you take all of this and you skip forward to the final episode, Chuck being defeated should have no impact on the boys' luck and, in extension, on their skills and ability to fight. This basically discredits the entire theory that when Chuck died, they lost their skills and their luck, which causes Dean's death. However, the writers could have easily added a line in when they received the luck from Fortuna that when they are successful in their task, then their hero's luck will leave them normal. That is quite possibly the simplest and easiest way the writers could have resolved and explained the issue of the low stakes and low amount of enemies in the show causing Dean to die in such a simple hunt. I don't know if it would have resolved everyone's concerns, but in my opinion, it definitely would have made the final episode just a bit more understandable and easier to accept, considering the fact that they couldn't have more enemies and actors in that scene to make it more threatening. There is also another less common theory that I did hear of at times, and that's the theory of Death wanting to get somewhat even on their tally. When looking back at Billy, all she wanted was both of the Winchesters dead, since she feels they should have been dead a long time ago. So the theory is that the new Death wanted to even the score just a little bit, so she ended up taking Dean's life. I personally don't think this theory is thought through enough, since, as they say in the show, Death technically owes them for helping create her after Billy has died. I also feel like if it was some evil plan to sort of break even on the scores, we would have seen it or heard it from the new Death, or we would have just had something else happen. But I did just want to throw it in here nonetheless, since it's an interesting idea. Moving on from the theories of why Dean dies, I want to talk about everything that happens afterwards. So this is, in my opinion, another example of kind of poor execution, since the dialogue that happens as he is dying is so incredibly long that it begins to become just a tad comedic. It takes Dean a whole 7 minutes of screen time to die, and the kicker is that he says that he feels like he's fading pretty quickly, And then he goes on to talk for 5 whole minutes. Like, in that time span, Sam could have gone to the car, gotten some witchy stuff from the trunk, and done a simple healing spell. Like, these guys know so much stuff, and for some reason they just both kind of accepted Dean's death in this moment. I know you could argue that Dean wanted to die in this moment, as he felt that it would be a very fitting way to move on, but I just can't help but feel it goes against their character of constantly wanting to save each other. Again, the guys know so many things that they wouldn't need to have any sort of deal to save his soul. There are so many different healing spells that don't require taking a life to make sure that he would be okay. And listen, there's some great lines of dialogue in this speech, but with it kind of dragging on and the cause of Dean dying sort of affecting my personal mood when watching this scene, seeing them stand there and talk when there was so many ways to save him or heal him, it kind of just made me more upset and almost angry towards the writing and the end of these characters. The bad execution and increase of confusion continues to move forward in the last episode. We have the Party City wig and forced old man sourpuss that Sam is seen donning. We never get to know for certain who Sam marries, if it's Eileen or if it's some other random girl. We never truly know if Cass is alive since we don't see him at the end of the episode and we only hear that he helped Jack. We don't get a reunion from him and Dean. And while I do like the concept of Dean being in heaven, living his best life and driving around visiting family members and friends, while Sam lives life on Earth before eventually joining Dean in heaven, I just can't help but wish that we saw more reunions with people, other people in heaven, not just Bobby. Similarly, it's mildly upsetting that Sam doesn't invite anyone to Dean's funeral. We've been to so many Hunter's funerals throughout this show, and the fact that we don't get a shot of all of the people that Dean helped in his life, people like Jody, Donna, the girls, Garth, all of the people from Apocalypse World, no one is invited, and it's honestly kind of sad to see. One thing that I will say is I like how they left the ending with a clip of Sam's son, who is named Dean in the show, with the iconic tattoo, because it does leave the door open for a spin-off show or a future continuation later on in the years. I don't think that we will be getting that anytime soon though, especially after the cancellation of the spin-off of Mary and John being hunters when they were younger. It would be really cool though if, say, 20-30 years down the line, they did start a spin-off show and just kind of started everything over again in the story, showing us beginner hunts with new characters. It could be something really cool to see later on. But now, as I get to the end of the video, I just want to sum up all of my thoughts on the show. As a whole, the season finale of Supernatural is full of good ideas and concepts for how to end the show and the characters' stories, but the multitude of rushed plot lines and poorly written execution of those ideas, as well as the lack of tension and the difficulties caused by the cyclical writing trap setting up low stakes in the final episode due to the show growing so big over the years, it definitely caused the end result of the show to be well below where it should have been, considering the size and scale of the show's popularity and fandom over the years. With the lack of reunions in heaven and the many issues stated above, it is hard to accept this as the final season of Supernatural. Despite understanding the challenges that production faced due to shutdowns, it is ultimately a disappointing ending to what is such a special and great show. If any of you guys made it this far into the video, let me know by leaving a ghost emoji in the comments down below. And as always, this is mostly just my opinions, and I would love to hear all of your thoughts and feelings on this show. This was actually really hard to analyze simply because a lot of the show deals with magic systems and rules that aren't always stated as clearly, and the overall concepts can be, a bit abstract at times. Like I said earlier, technically everything I've complained about or brought up as a plot mystery can technically be summed up to the actions of God. Even though I personally strongly feel that's not the case, it is still true that it can just be explained by it's God's will. But that being said, I really hope that my explanations make some amount of sense to all of you, and I just can't wait to see how you guys feel about this show. So if you guys like my discussion, please hit that like button down below and leave your thoughts in the comment section. While you're down there, click subscribe to see more videos from me, And turn on notifications if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you future souls next time. Bye, guys!